A regional rematch for the national championship as Alabama and Georgia prove beyond a shadow of a doubt they are the best two teams in college football. While Georgia's been number one for most of the season, Alabama needed a late season push just to make the playoff. There were two unbeaten teams in all of college football when Alabama entered the SEC championship game, Georgia and Cincinnati. Bama beat them both in back-to-back games. Now, Nick Saban on the cusp of back-to-back national titles.
Preparation is going to be really, really important for us to go out there and be able to execute the way we need to be able to have any chance of success at all.
But Saban is in an unfamiliar role as an underdog, despite beating Georgia in the SEC championship game, and despite the fact that he has owned the Dogs for more than a decade. The Tide have won 7 straight in the series, including the national championship game 4 years ago. But Kirby Smart believes this year's team, and this game in particular, will be different.
We've worked really hard the last 30 days at getting better at us. So our guys are excited and looking forward to this opportunity on the biggest stage there is.
Will Georgia finally end its 41-year title drought, or will Alabama's reign continue? It's time to crown our national champion.
And it is with great enthusiasm and excitement that we welcome in Barrett Sallee and Dennis Dodd from Indianapolis along to the conversation here on the Cover 3 podcast. And also, I think that we need to have a little bit of time to honor our own Dennis Dodd, big game Dennis Dodd, who is going to be receiving the 2022 Burt McGrain Award. So, Dennis, I'll let you take the lead here. Congratulations on being the recipient of this award and joining a very prestigious class of those who have worked in our industry. But also, what's got your attention? What storyline has you really focused heading in here to the national championship game?
Yeah, thanks so much. As Woody Allen once said, 85% of life is just showing up. So that's what that's about. But for the game, I think that unlike 2011, when the world kind of poo-pooed the rematch, and it eventually led to what we have now, a 14 playoff. There's plenty of drama. There's plenty of storylines here. Georgia as the underdog trying to break through. Kirby trying to break through. Nick Saban trying to keep it going. And the greatest athletes maybe collectively in college football. It's fantastic. So there's plenty to watch in this game.
Yeah, we're getting the two top teams. I think that's the goal always when we're talking about national championships. But we're talking about Stetson Bennett, right? That's what I'm most excited about. You're talking about a story that should be a movie and probably will be a movie at some point. Talking about a former walk-on goes to JUCO, comes back, and if they win, man, what a fantastic story for Stetson Bennett. The guy is not a game manager. He is a difference maker. He's a big reason why Georgia's in this game. So I'm excited to see what he does on this stage and how he reacts and tries to make amends for what happened a month ago, which was not one of his best performances.
I don't want to say I talked to him this week because it was all via Zoom. So me and 70 of my closest friends talked to him. But that chip on his shoulder, Barrett, is so obvious when he talks to the media. That line he had last week about the heart surgery, I wouldn't go watch myself give a speech on heart surgery because I don't know anything about heart surgery, meaning the fans don't know what they're talking about. But I think you touched on something. No long a game manager, you can tell that Todd Monken and crew let him throw downfield more. You saw the game was dropping it down silos in the Orange Bowl. He is a weapon. Number 2 in, yards per attempt in the country, and number 2, I think, in the SEC in pass efficiency. That's pretty heady stuff.
Yeah.
Let's have some fun with some superlatives, why don't we? Because we want to take a deep dive into this matchup. Let's start with unsung hero. Who's going to be the unsung hero of this matchup? And Barrett, I want you to take first stab at this.
So punters are people too, right? Punters they deserve recognition, and Jake Camarda is a really good punter for the Georgia Bulldogs. Now, look, go back to that Alabama and Auburn game in the Iron Bowl. The field position game was a big deal, and I think Jake Camarda, if it is a low-scoring game, if defenses do sort of drive the outcome, which I think probably will happen, then Jake Camarda has a really good chance at being the MVP. This guy's experienced. He's been around the block, it seems like forever at Georgia. But go make Bryce Young drive 90 yards. Go put some coffin corner kicks off that pylon. I think Jake Camarda will have a big say in who wins this game.
Yeah, mine is not as, I don't know, down in the weeds. No, nothing against Camarda, but I think you're absolutely right. But Bill O'Brien's a little bit more well-known. Blink, and you're going to miss him on Monday because now he's going to interview with the Jags because every coordinator that comes through Alabama on both sides of the ball interviews with somebody after a national championship, and well-deserved. I think Bill O'Brien's had a sneaky good year this year, obviously with Bryce Young winning the Heisman, obviously with the offensive output. But I think these last two games have fascinated me. They went into that Georgia game 37 days ago wanting to pass the ball. Tempo, three-step drops. Nakobe Dean in that front seven couldn't reach Bryce Young because the ball got out so quick. And then when they found they could run the ball against Cincinnati, well, that was that. Brian Robinson gets a career high. We know they can do both. He's an excellent play caller. And for a guy that was 0-4, run out of town with the Texans as a GM and a coach, this is quite an ascension for him, almost like a Steve Sarkisian-like resurrection.
You know, Barrett, you were on the right track with special teams, but you had the wrong specialist. I'm taking Georgia's kicker, Jack Podlesny. This is a Georgia offense that if you look statistically, the defense gets all the credit because it's an amazing defense, but the offense is very good, but it does have one weak spot, and it's where Stetson Bennett's weakness comes in play. In the red zone nationally, Georgia only ranks 71st in touchdown conversions inside the red zone at 59.7%. They've had to settle for a lot of field goals, and they're going up against an Alabama defense that has been good in the red zone itself. So I think we're going to see a couple drives where Jack Podlesny's leg is going to have to come through to put points on the board to either keep Georgia in the lead or help keep them in the game, and he's done an excellent job of that all season long. He's made 20 of his 25 field goal attempts, 68 of his 69-point after touchdowns. And I think Jack Podlesny's leg, big surprise here in an Alabama game, a field goal might decide this one. So I'm going to take Jack Podlesny.
How did I end up being so basic here? I am choosing an actual skill position player and declaring him an unsung hero, and that's because I think that Slade Bolden is going to have a huge game. And the fact that the first time that we saw Slade Bolden without John Mechie in the lineup in the college football playoff semifinals against Cincinnati, what did he do? He caught the very first touchdown of the game. In fact, if I remember correctly, it followed more or less unofficially 29 straight run calls. When they finally just did decide to throw the ball through the air, they did throw it to Slade Bolden. So I think that Bolden is probably going to have to be as big of an answer as Ja'Cory Brooks, as big of an answer as some of those other wide receiving options, that if Jamison Williams is going to get totally targeted and shut down by the Georgia defense, if they're going to slant all of their pass defense towards shutting down Jamison Williams, well, then Slade Bolden's going to have a huge day. So I will say that Slade Bolden is my unsung hero. Everyone loves a good bromance. We've got a bromance brewing with Barrett and Dennis. They're in Indianapolis. Tom will be joining them soon, so the bromance can continue. The love can extend. What about the best bromance within this college football playoff national championship game matchup? Dennis, what's the best bromance in Indianapolis right now? Besides you two, obviously.
Well, this one, this one's really easy for me. Until Georgia can prove otherwise, that they can stop the pitch and catch combination of Bryce Young and Jamison Williams, they've got to be, at least for me, Alabama offensively, the key to this game, because that's what they did in that championship game. Things may change. Things might change. We're going to talk about our picks here in a moment. But Kirby Smart said during the week that he said those were busts. He intimated it wasn't anything Alabama did. It was busts on Georgia's part. Well, by mere definition, a bust is something you did. But Jamison Williams is pretty good. I mean, figure out that he couldn't beat out Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jackson Smith-Njigba at Ohio State, and now he's at Alabama setting records. I think that is the best bromance in this. They are as connective tissue as there gets in this game.
I'm going to go with coaches. I'm going to go Dan Lanning and Kirby Smart, because we go back to what happened a month ago. The Georgia defense, the greatest defense in the history of the world, didn't get to Bryce Young once. And Dan Lanning right now is doing two jobs. He's the Oregon head coach. He's the Georgia defensive coordinator. I think the bromance between these two, the trust that Kirby has, not only in Dan Lanning to do both jobs, but to fix what went wrong last time out. I think he trusts Dan Lanning. I think you've talked to him over the course of the last couple of days. Clearly, he doesn't think that it's going to be an issue with Dan doing two jobs at once. And so I think the trust and the fact that Dan Lanning has the ability to do both and recognize what went wrong. Because you're right, it was a lot of Georgia. We've heard Kirby Smart consistently say, we're worried about us. We want to worry about us. We're fixing us. Well, that means defense. And I think Dan Lanning and Kirby Smart, after this game, if Georgia wins, they're going to give each other a big old bro hug.
I think the best bromance clearly is Dennis and I, because we are on the exact same page with this one. I'm also going with Bryce Young and Jameson Williams. Bryce Young won the Heisman Trophy, deservedly so, had an amazing season, put up eye-popping numbers. But if you look at those numbers, I think he owes about a third of that trophy to Jameson Williams, because Jameson finished with 1,507 yards and 15 touchdowns this season. And if you break that down to a rate of Bryce Young's production, that accounts for 33.5% of Bryce Young's passing yards and 32.6% of his passing touchdowns. So if you take Jameson Williams away from Bryce Young, he probably doesn't win the Heisman Trophy. So I think that's the best bromance going into this title game.
Oh, I'll take it to the Georgia side of things, because Stetson Bennett has a lot of responsibility in this game, and he's got a lot that he has to overcome. You understand that you're going to be having one of the best pass rushers in the country, more on him in a little bit, bearing down on you, especially in third and long type situations. But you've got one of the best tight ends and an emerging superstar in Brock Bowers over there over the seam. There's no throw that Stetson Bennett loves more than throwing down the seam to number 19 and just letting him go to make a play after the catch, because he's such a physical specimen. He is the prototype of what so many NFL teams are looking for in that position: the ability to run block, the ability to make plays and beat linebackers and safeties. So I think in terms of Stetson Bennett under duress, who is he going to be looking for? Who is going to bail him out? It is going to be Brock Bowers. And that is love, when somebody can bail you out of a tricky situation. So Brock Bowers, Stetson Bennett, that is my selection for my best bromance. All right, what about looking ahead to the next level? I just mentioned that Brock Bowers, and he still has some more time in college football, but when we start to think about who is the most likely to succeed at the next level, Barrett, who's got your eyes right now from the NFL side of things?
Well, the NFL has rapidly become a pass-first league, so you need pass rushers, and Will Anderson is just a terrifying human being in every aspect of the word. He is a disruptor of all disruptors. I think, honestly, he's one of the best defensive players we've had in college football in several years, and now obviously he's got to wait a year before being draft eligible. But this guy at the next level, you're not going to be able to single him. You're going to have to keep other players in. And in the NFL, it's a lot different now. You know, it's not a ground and pound style league. So I look for when he gets to the NFL, you're talking about several Pro Bowls. You're talking about potentially defensive MVPs. He's not just a third down rusher, but even if he was, it seems like the NFL has evolved to a point where every down is a third down play because it passes so much.
When you talk about the great linebackers, and I agree, obviously, when you talk about the great linebackers at Alabama, when you talk about the great linebackers under Nick Saban, this name shoots to the top when you talk about Will Anderson, Derek Thomas. Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of us don't remember him. I covered him when he was with the Chiefs in the 90s, the number one draft choice in 1989. But go back and look at him. He is Will Anderson, and Will Anderson is Derek Thomas. Bigger, 6'4", 243, I think, Will Anderson. But in 1988, Derek Thomas had 27 sacks. Now, that was 12 years before college football recognized the number, so it's kind of a mythical figure. Will Anderson had 17.5 leading the country going into this game. If he gets 2.5, which is not out of the realm of possibility, he would be the first player in college football to have 20 sacks in 16 years. Elvis Dumervil did it in 2005 for Louisville. And everything you said is right. You've got to double him. You've got to account for him. And he's that edge rusher, which college football and NFL have kind of said, well, forget defensive end, linebacker. We're just going to call it a hybrid. He's an edge. He's not going to cover. Although Pete Golding said this week, the defensive coordinator said, we drop him some. I don't recall him dropping in anything. He is a force off the edge.
You know, if we look at the field on Monday night, the truth is there are going to be 30 guys on it who will probably be playing in the NFL one day, and at least 15 of them are probably going to be good NFL players. So it's kind of difficult to just single one out, but if I have to pick one who I think is the most likely to succeed, I'm going to go with Georgia linebacker Nakobe Dean. I just think that if you watch him play, it's not just the talent and the athleticism that has him, flowing from sideline to sideline, making every single tackle. It's the intelligence. He's the smartest player on the field, too. He's dissecting and figuring out what offenses are about to do before the snap, seeing the play before it happens, and putting himself in position to make the tackle or make the play every single time. And I think that is going to translate very well to the next level. So when you combine his football intelligence and his athleticism, I think he's a can't-miss prospect. He's going to be an early first-round pick, and he's going to have a very long, very successful NFL career.
Yeah, Tom, I went with Nakobe Dean too, and honestly, it was recency bias. And not that his entire body of work is not worthy of this, but when that man called out Michigan's orbit sweep and then ran, I don't know, like 40 yards from across the field to be able to go and make the play and create that stop for Georgia, it's absolutely ridiculous. I've gone in and followed that up with a little bit more, review of the play and looking at Nakobe Dean in general. And your football IQ stuff is what stands out to me, because it is the work that Nakobe Dean does from Sunday through Friday that helps him be among the best in the entire country on Saturdays. And all we got to do is just shift that. The work that he is going to do from Mondays to Saturdays is going to allow him to make game-changing, the huge stops like that when he gets into the NFL. And all of that put together with his versatility, the way that the game has changed in a lot of the same ways that we're talking about Will Anderson. I mean, we've targeted a lot of linebackers here, a lot of tweeners, a lot of players who have the kind of athleticism to go sideline to sideline and also come up in the pass rush. We are identifying the right kind of players that are going to be difference makers at the next level. But I'm right there with you, Tom. Nakobe Dean was my choice as well. Before we hit the break, I want to throw this back to Dennis right now, because you had a great point going into this game that I want to get a chance to dig deep on, because Alabama has won in a lot of different ways. It's won in a lot of different ways throughout the Nick Saban era. It's won in a lot of different ways here in the 2021 season. It's had to evolve. It's had to adapt. It's had to change. What about the different ways that Alabama has shifted itself have really stood out to you as we look ahead to this national championship game?
Well, it's really both teams, the way they got here. It's two different ways and two very interesting ways. Obviously, I talked about what Alabama's done week to week in the last two games, what they've done. But you go back to 2014 when Nick decided to go to the spread and hire Lane and use a converted running back or receiver, Blake Sims, to set the total offense record. How about that for a change at Alabama? Now the best quarterbacks and the best receivers automatically almost consider Alabama first. They're an offensive team. You think of that first now. At the beginning of the 2020 season, Alabama's offense gave up more points in the first 9 quarters than they did the entire previous season, and Alabama still won. Now, you look at Georgia, and I think they're what Alabama used to be, and I'm not discrediting them at all. They are what Alabama was from like 09 to 13. Run the ball, punt, play defense, and have a game manager or quarterback. I agree with what you said about Stetson Bennett. But before that, he was a game manager, and before that, that's what Alabama had at quarterback. I think it's fascinating that they got here two different ways, and not only that, but separated themselves from the rest of college football right now. Alabama was there. Georgia was really close to being there, but now even the Ohio States and the Clemsons are looking up at these two programs.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.